Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for a review of the Horus Heresy Book 3, Extermination. So, I continue on with my series reviewing the main line of black books produced by Forge World documenting the Horus Heresy for the Warhammer 40,000 subgame 30k. So, the first two books in this series were concerned exclusively with the events of the Istvaan system, both firstly in terms of Istvaan 3, the Istvaan 3 atrocity, and secondly the Istvaan 5 drop site massacre. At the end of Book 2, Massacre, it very much brings a story to a close, shall we say, of Istvaan 5, and it's kind of interesting that for Book 3, well, where do they go next? Because the stories of Istvaan 3 and Istvaan 5 are very well established in the lore. So an interesting thing with this book is the direction in which the authors take the examination of the history and then the units. And this book does so in an interesting way by diverging the historical narratives down at least, well, three main routes in this particular book. So yeah, it's an interesting change of pace and direction compared to the first two books, and it starts to broaden the overall scope of the focus of the Horus Heresy books outside of these classic battles of the Istvaan system, and starts to turn it into the galaxy-wide conflict that the Horus Heresy becomes. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do a detailed review. I'm going to go cover to cover, and take you through the content, call out some interesting bits on the way. Let's get into it. So we'll start by having a look at the contents. I mean, it's got the same style book as before. Same production quality, you've got a big leather-bound black book, high quality paper, all these are gold-edged, which is a quality touch, shall we say. And this one opens with a picture of an Iron Warrior's dreadnought charging forth, and it says, "The hour of Horus is at hand, the serpent uncoils and slaughter stalks the cold stars." And as we will find, that is a portent to some of the key themes of this book. So here we have it, Horus Heresy Book 3 by Alan Bligh. So Alan Bligh, a pivotal staff writer at Forge World, and still this is very much his brainchild. Okay, so this book was published in 2014, and here are the contents. So there's a introductory section which talks about it kind of picks up the end of Book 2 and talks about some of the activities of the traitors on Istvaan 5 after the drop site massacre. It also talks a little bit about the naval assets or the warships of the Great Crusade, so it introduces a new bit of detail into the history, shall we say. And then we move into the lore section of the book. So this book follows the same format as the previous two in that we have history, unit background, special rules, and then army lists. So we have the Fires of Heresy, which is made up of three parts: the invasion of Paramar, Victory's Vengeance, and the Battle of Foll. We then have the Space Marine Legions, so 4 new legions are covered in detail: the Imperial Fists, the Alpha Legion, the Iron Warriors, and the Raven Guard. And the 2 Titan legions, Legio Furians and Legio Gryphonicus, are also covered. The next section is a large and well-developed campaign section: the Vengeance's Victory campaign and the Blood in the Void expansion. And these tie well into the invasion of Paramar and the Battle of Foll. The key introductory army section here, or the key army section in this book, was the introduction of the Tagmata Omnissiah, or the indentured feudal forces of the Mechanicum's Forge Worlds. So this was kind of like a brand new militant force introduced in this book for the tag matter, or for the Mechanicum. So previously we'd had the Ordo Reductor in book 1 and the Legio Cybernetica in book 2. Both of those were existing entities and to a degree had been developed in the lore before. However, the tag matter is a new development, and it talks about the standing army of a Forge World and its troop options. So this book really brings the Mechanicum to life. We then have updates to the Space Marine Legion, so the introduction of some new war gear and vehicles, and then finally we have the army list appendices for the 4 new legions. So let's move forward. So we have a fantastic piece of art here, which we have the high quality that we've become accustomed to with these books, and this depicts a clash between the Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, Legio Furians, and the Legio Griffonicus on Paramar V. And we'll get into the detail of this, and straight away, interesting observation. We have the Iron Warriors fighting Alpha Legion. What's happened here? Preface. Once again, we have an introduction by the vaguely named AK. So this guy is the Imperial narrator who witnesses or lived through the times of Horus Heresy, and all the history in these represent his collected writings towards the end of his life, where he recounts the events of the heresy. And we have the star map as well of the Imperium, and then the areas in which the Horus Heresy happened. Obviously, an enormous volume of space. And then we come to the first section of the histories and lore, the Ashes of Istvaan. This talks about what the traitors did in the aftermath on the planet of Istvaan V after the near annihilation of the Iron Hand Salamanders and Raven Guard, following the treacherous betrayal of the 4 supporting legions. And there's some grim descriptions of what the traitors do with the remains of the survivors and their war gear, and they also erect an enormous monolith to their victory as well. There's a section here that talks about the warships of the Great Crusade. So in the history section, there's always some background on military equipment. So we've had a couple of takes on Space Marine armour, and now we talk about the actual warships of the Crusade, which are clearly a key part of the military makeup of the Imperial Crusade forces. So that's just a brief intro, shall we say, and then we move into the Fires of Heresy, which is made up of 3 separate sections. The Fires of Heresy deals with the events that immediately followed Istvaan V, and this is where Alan Blythe splits the story into 3 separate arcs, all of which are interesting in their own right, and all of which tell us something about the forces and the legions involved, and play into what is going to come later, shall we say. So the first section is this, and it is the invasion of Paramar V. So Paramar V is a strategically positioned Mechanicum Forge World, and it was of such strategic value that Horus assigned a large force in the form of the Alpha Legion to take Paramar V intact, to act as a strategic planet. And this is a fascinating story, this, and also really reveals interesting characteristics about, well, particularly the Alpha Legion, but also has an unexpected turn of events. So the Alpha Legion are dispatched in great force, supported by the Tiger Eyes or Legio Furians, to forcibly take this Forge World. At this point, and it talks about the strategy adopted by the Alpha Warriors. And at this point, Alfarius and his senior Harrow Masters knows that he still has the element of surprise on his hand, and that Paramar V will be unaware of the Alpha Legion's treachery. So their plan is to rush in system, reach the planet, and at the last minute turn on the defenders to achieve surprise. Which is very much what starts to happen up until an unexpected event. And the unexpected event comes in the form of an Iron Warriors battle fleet that arrives unexpectedly in the system. So and this is an interesting understanding of how diverse and how dispersed the legions are, and how they operated under local command outside of their primarchs. And indeed, the Iron Warrior fleet that arrives here is loyal, and after being turned on by the surprised Alpha Legion, who adapt their plan accordingly, give fight against the Alpha Legion and support the defenders of Paramar. And if I can find the name of the character, so it's the 77th Grand Battalion of the Iron Warriors, and is led by the Siege Master Kaya Valen, who, as we'll come to see later, is a formidable Iron Hands warrior, and he's given a profile in this. So yes, so the Iron Hands, the Iron Hands actually turned the tide against the Alpha Legion early in the orbital battle by bisecting their main battleship in two with a ramming attack, and then they make Planet 4 with a sizable part of their force. So then so this is a map of Paramar V and what's called the Panopticon, the main stronghold of the Archmagos, and you got kind of like one of these high-level overviews of who landed where and did what. It's very well. I like how this is written, and it kind of gives you lots of food for imaginative play in Horus Heresy. And what it's basically saying is, if you want to play a force of any legion, you can create a scenario where you can be loyalist or you could be traitor. It's a nice way of writing it, because clearly this is saying you could be a large Iron Warriors loyalist force. Anyway, so the battle. So it talks about the battle and its conclusion. The Alpha Legion are ultimately victorious, given their enormous material strength and particular advantage in Titans, and the Tiger Eyes outnumber the War Griffins and defeat them. And by the time the Titan firepower is brought against the Panopticon Citadel, of course, all is lost for the defenders. However, it does finish by saying that Kaya Valen and the Archmagos of the facility escape, and were last seen retreating into the vaults of a Panopticon and were never seen again. So it leaves a door open that they survived. There's a description here of an Iron Warrior survivor, and the battle fought and how he survived. A mixture of forces there. It finishes with an interesting bit here to give a flavour of how the tension that existed between the Alpha Legion and Horus's force. And at the end of the battle, the Alpha Legion immediately leave. They take all their forces and go, and the supporting Mechanicum Archmagos in Arsatariel desperately pleads to Horus for reinforcements, because all of a sudden he's barely in control of this freshly conquered world. And Horus responds furiously to Alfarius as to what he'd done, and Alfarius points out to Horus that he has followed the orders he was given to the exact letter to defeat the defending forces. However, he does nothing more. and takes his leave. And apparently within the communication hidden and encoded within his transmission to Horus from Alpharius is the statement, "The devil is not mocked." And as we'll find out, the Alpha Legion get up to all sorts of fun and games as the heresy progresses. So we then move to part 5, Victory's Vengeance, and this picks up the story of Istvaan V. So at the end of the Battle of Istvaan V, on the ground the Iron Hands were wiped out, the Salamanders were pretty much wiped out as well. However, the Raven Guard were able to effect a fighting retreat, and a sizable number of legionnaires survived the actual day of the massacre, and then went on to regroup under the command of Corvus Corax, and then wage a guerrilla war of survival over the period of a couple of months. And this takes us back to the map of the Urgol Depression, the site of the Istvaan V massacre, and this charts the course of Corvax's insurgency. But yeah, so this kind of like gives a new angle to the Istvaan V battle, and at the end of that, when he's finally cornered by the World Eaters, and this is very much a battle of, it works well as a battle of the World Eaters who stayed on Istvaan V in force. The World Eaters versus the Raven Guard. The surviving Raven Guard are finally saved and escape the planet. This is a good picture. This, if you've got book 2, this is a recreation of the opening picture from that, where the Iron Hand host of war is charging towards the traitor fortifications and facing off against the outcoming defenders. And here we have sort of the remains of the Iron Hands after they've been slaughtered by the 4 traitor legions. Here we have some more equipment. Appropriately, we've talked about the Raven Guard. Here we've got a section on Mark 6 armour and combi weapons. Of course, the Mark 6 armour was being trialled by primarily by the Raven Guard. Obviously, the Alpha Legion also got hold of some early on. And then we move on to the third new strand of the story, which is a Battle of Foll. And the Battle of Foll shifts the battlescape into orbital actions. Now, obviously, this is 40k; it's not Battlefleet Gothic. But what comes on the back of this is some additional rules for the Blood in the Void expansion that allows you to fight. Gives you rules for fighting boarding actions, of which many took place between this battle, now the Battle of Foll. So Rogel Dawn, who's the Praetorian of Terror and the de facto leader of the Imperial forces after the heresy began, dispatched a huge fleet to crush the traitors. However, the warp, and no doubt the malevolent powers, disrupted the passage of that fleet, and the 2/3 that survive the warp storms emerge in the Foll system. On Foll, they are then intercepted by a grand fleet of the Iron Warriors, led none other than their Primarch Perturabo. The Imperial Fist fleet is led by is commanded by Alexis Pollux, and Alexis Pollux actually turns the tables on Perturabo, as I'll come to in a moment. Yeah, so Pollux basically, he turns the table in the orbital battle and gets the upper hand on Perturabo's force. And there's an interesting section here where it talks about one of his strike cruisers, commanded by Arminandus Tyr, is tasked to board Perturabo's flagship, the Iron Blood, in an attempt to take out Perturabo, which is they end up fighting the Primarch himself, but are ultimately defeated. So it was a gambit that nearly worked, and an interesting example where a line officer of a legion in effect defeats a Primarch in battle, outthinks Perturabo. And then we have some pictures of some of the vessels involved. This is a Blood Iron, so this is a flagship, Perturabo's flagship. This is a Tribune, Pollux's flagship, and this is a Contrador. Ironically, this is destroyed. However, Pollux and a host of his legionnaires mount a boarding action on the Contrador and take it, and ultimately escape in it. Nice little role reversal there. Yeah, some good art and description of this spacecraft. And that concludes the lore section. So yeah, it's I suppose there's lengthwise this is longer than some, probably about 15 pages longer than some of the previous lore sections. And it's good, and it's good to see a decent amount of justice done to each of the new story arcs, shall we say, as we move forward. Then now we move into the Legion background. So we start with with Rogol Dawn's Imperial Fists, and in each of these there is the background to the Legion's formation, the Primarch's influence, their homeworld, their organisation, their heraldry. I like these. I mean, these are helmet designs, and you have very somewhat Rogue Trader, old school style helmet stripes for denoting rank, which I quite like in the Imperial Fists. And then a selection of warriors are depicted as well in the usual high quality art that we've become accustomed to. And each one of these has an accompanying story which is relevant to, well, in this case most of these are around the Battle of Foll. And then we have a Imperial Fist Cerastus assault ram, or Cestus assault ram. And then there is an exemplary battle description for the Imperial Fists as well. And this takes the approach of there are several battles described. And then we come to the Alpha Legion. So I'm going to talk in a bit more depth about the Alpha Legion because it's really interesting. And the Alpha Legion are a very mysterious force in 30k and 40k lore. I mean, you know, there's a whole debate as to whose side they're really on. Are they fighting for Horus or against him? Are they for the Emperor or against him, or are they doing their own thing? So this is interesting because it does get into a bit of that, and it talks about the origins, and it actually makes comparisons between the Alpha Legion, the 20th Legion, and the Salamanders and the Space Wolves in terms of an unusual genesis, which I thought was fascinating. The Alpha Legion didn't fight much in the early Crusade, and there's conjecture and discussion in this as to what they were actually doing at that time. I love the artwork for the Alpha Legion. It's one of the few instances in the Horus Heresy books where you actually get any blue sky. Obviously, for some reason the artist decided, well, blue, you know, Alpha Legion, blue sky, you know, Alpha Legion, blue azure armour, let's have some blue sky. So here we have some nice, you know, some nice cumulus clouds and some fire raptor gunships soaring above them. So yeah, I like that. There's within the historical description here, there is actually some redacted elements. So even within this story, it's given us some mystery as well. So whatever AK wrote was somehow struck from the Imperial records. Yeah, so the Alpha Legion, very unusual legion. It then talks about how, as the Great Crusade progressed, they became an increasingly large, sophisticated and well-equipped legion, and arguably by the end of the heresy they could have actually been second in size only to the Ultramarines, but the mystery and secrecy that goes around them is so great that nobody really knows. It also talks here about how the Alpha Legion extensively studied the tactics and strategies and units and equipment of other legions, and that fits nicely in the game rules because of course the Alpha Legion can use any specialist unit from any other legion in their force, which is a neat feature if you ever want to play Alpha Legion. You know, and they also, the Alpha Legion will also operate under operated under the colours of other legions. So in false flag operations, so you could really mix it up. If you were wanting to do a force, you could do an Alpha Legion force dressed as in ultramarine colours. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Definitely confuse the heck out of your opponent. And also, if you've got a pre-painted army as well, I guess arguably with the Alpha Legion you can play any coloured troops. It doesn't matter how you've painted your Space Marines, you can always do an Alpha Legion force, and you just say, well, it's a false flag force, and come up with some history around that. There's a page of discussion here around the origins of the Primarch Alpharius, and it's quite funny. At the end of each section here, it finishes by saying, this account is a lie, this account is a lie, these accounts are lies. So you don't know what's the truth. You could speculate though that one of them is the truth, or perhaps none of them are. It adds to the general character of the Alpha Legion. Yeah, you may have guessed, but I do like this Alpha Legion section. It's very interestingly written, and the Alpha Legion themselves are a fascinating force. I said when I reviewed Book 2, if I were to ever do a traitor force, I would do I'd do Word Bearers. I'd also equally likely to do an Alpha Legion force. It also talks about how, as the Great Crusade progressed, the Alpha Legion became more and more allure unto themselves, and by the time of the Horus Heresy, even the Alpha Legion, lots of other legions fell out with them when they operated alongside them. I mean, even the Night Lords had bad things to say about how the Alpha Legion operated, and that's an extraordinary thing to say. So they'd fallen out with a lot of legions, not all, you know, they got along with the Iron Hands. But they tended to be used by Horus, you know, as a force on their own, and even Horus was beginning to doubt their loyalty and certainty late in the Great Crusade. And it does, again, it really makes you wonder what the Alpha Legion's purpose is, and indeed what the Emperor was thinking when he created them. So yeah, very interesting piece of lore and background is the Alpha Legion section of this book, and certainly one of the highlights from my personal perspective, one of the highlights of this book. And then it has an exemplary battle section as well. There's a particularly pleasing example, or disturbing example, depending how you want to read it, of Alpha Legion tactical approach, as personified by the hunting of the Akhariath, which is basically a form of Xenos that like to drain the marrow of humans. Lovely. Anyway, so as well as exterminating them, the Alpha Legion had a nice little parting shot, and they created a virus with Xenos biologists of the Mechanicum that would infect humans, and, as it says here, only have a 7% mortality rate in the humans. However, if they were preyed upon by the Akhariath, it was singularly fatal to those Xenos creatures. But that's an example of the sort of lengths the Alpha Legion would go to, and the oblique approach to warfare they had. Next legion is the Iron Warriors, so Perturabos, Legion of Steel, the well-known planet Olympia, where Perturabo went a bit nuts, and, well, if he wasn't already nuts. Description of the culture and history of Olympia. Discussion around Perturabo's state of mind and his legion, and why they betrayed the Emperor, and declared for Horus. Great picture there. Very gritty depiction of the battle. A lot of dead Iron Warriors there. Moving into unit descriptions, this is a picture of a Soul campaign Iron Warrior, and it says this legionary was involved in the pacification of the Kuiper Belt, so outer objects in our own solar system we would know today, and it has a sort of thunder eagle symbol as opposed to the Iron Warriors insignia. Of course, Iron Warriors, we can't have Iron Warriors without looking at a lot of tanks. Perturabo's brainchild, the Typhon, which is a Vindicator turned up to 11, deadly vehicle, and then an exemplary battle for the Iron Warriors as well. And then we move on to the sons of Corvus Corax, the Raven Guard. Again, the same sort of detailed description and background. A nice bit of history here around the origins and testing of Mark 6 armour, and also its numbering, and how it nearly ended up being called Mark 5 but then got changed. And then there's quite a specific description given here of a number of survivors of the Raven Guard after Istvaan 3, and it says here there are Istvaan 5, sorry, get the right Istvaan, there are only 4,000 left. I mean, so there's hardly anything left of the Raven Guard. I mean, while they must have nearly deployed at full strength, because while the Iron Hands were wiped out, they had a significant number of troops elsewhere that didn't actually get tangled in Istvaan 5, so a lot of Iron Hands survived, but the Salamanders and the Raven Guard suffered particularly grievously, despite not losing as many troops in the actual battle itself. And then a selection of their armour again, and you can't have Raven Guard without having a Thunderhawk gunship, can you? And then moving on to an exemplary battle for this Legion. And that completes the section on the Legion, and then we move to Legio Furians, so the Tiger-Eyes Traitor Legion. This is anyone who bought White Dwarf 108 30 years ago would probably remember the Tiger-Eyes Traitor Legion. Very distinctive black and yellow paint schemes. And equally familiar will be Legio Griffonicus, the War Griffins. I like the War Griffins. I painted my Warhound Titan in their scheme. I always like the sort of camo coloration. I did some nicer airbrushing. It's good for airbrushing his War Griffin paint schemes. So moving on. So excuse me. That completes the background section. We then move into the campaign rules. And this is the first section is the Vengeance's Victory campaign. So this is the flight of the Raven Guard at Istvaan 5, and it introduces what's called the Tactical Strike rule set. So you can basically you can fight sort of like a campaign where you have to be concerned about supplies, maintenance of armour, etc. And there are some general rules that are brought into play to reflect that. And then also talk here about historical accuracy. Basically, like I said before with the Alpha Legion, it's encouraging you to play if you don't necessarily have the units involved, a force of units involved in these particular battles. If you ever wondered what a Volkite weapon looks like when it's firing, well, there you go. A beam of red energy. So this is all you've got a mixture of rules, scenarios, and then deployment ideas as well. And it's a full-blown campaign. It also has some rules around heroes as well, and continuity, which is good. And then we have the Blood in the Void expansion section. So this is to complement the Battle of Foll, and it basically is an expanded set of ship-to-ship combat rules to allow you to recreate the battles between the Imperial Fist and Iron Warrior boarding parties that took place while the Void battle raged. It even gives you some special units as well, like Voidsman Gang, which is quite neat. So just basically crew armed with whatever weapons they could lay their hands on. Quite like this picture here. It's almost like a picked cam of aboard an Iron Warriors vessel, showing capturing a Imperial Fist boarding party. And that concludes the rules section. So there's two nice sections in the rules there to complement the history that goes with this book. So you've got the Istvaan V flight of the Raven Guard with the campaign to go with that. Then you have the Battle of Foll and the Blood in the Void rules to go with that. And then this new army list of Tagmata Omnissiah, of course, complements the first part of the lore, which is the Battle of Paramar V, because it gives you, for the first time, a fully fledged Mechanicum army list. So this greatly expands on the army list for the Legio Cybernetica in Book 2. And indeed you can swap units between the two. Well, you can reverse compatible. I think this has got everything that the Legio Cybernetica rules had, and also allows you to use the original rules. From the point of view of these rules though, particularly the points values are out of date. So if you're playing Mechanicum, or playing against Mechanicum, you should really be directing your opponent to obtain the Tagmata army list book, because the Mechanicum in this list are underpointed, and for a fair game you should use the newer rules, and also the same with the Marine lists. So I have a description of the Mechanicum, a planetary Mechanicum force. Lots of war gear, yeah, obviously it's a Mechanicum. They've got a lot of fancy kit. They've got the weirdest and the most wonderful and terrifying weapons of the Heresy. We have the rules on cybertheurgy for automata boosting. And then we get into the list itself. There is a named character, which is Archmagos in our Satariel. So he was the leader of the assault force on Paramar V for the traitors. Interesting bit of lore for this guy, quite like him. It says, it basically says that he's pretty much a robot, having pretty much all of his biological matter being reduced to goo by a Xenos creature called a Carnoplasm. I want a Carnoplasm to be introduced into the game. I'd like one. So this list introduced quite a few new units into the Mechanicum from the Legio Cybernetica list. So we have the Ursarax, which have only recently got models, the Triaros armoured conveyor, Vorax fast attack robots, Thanatar siege automata, Krios battle tanks. I've done a couple of reviews on those tanks, and then Questoris Knights. And here we have a picture of what I think was a prototype Questoris Cerastus Knight Lancer. You can see it's a prototype because it hasn't yet got the shield which the final model had, and the lance had a different design. And then the Space Marine Army, or Space Marine Legion, also got some additions in this book. So what do we get? The Andalus pattern drop core, the Charybdis assault claw, so the supersized assault drop pod, Fire Raptors, Achilles Alpha pattern Land Raider, so when you have to have a Land Raider that absolutely can't be killed. The Sikaran Venator tank destroyer, Falchion super heavy tank destroyer, so the big guns for the Marine Legion. Stormblade, because you can never have enough plasma. And then rules for the Castellum Stronghold as well. Which is you could do some really good games around these, and you've got lots of rules for defensive options with them. Excuse me. And then we have the Marine Legion army appendices. We have the Iron. So this is, again, gives you Legion specific rules, the Primarch and their unique squads. If you remember when I was talking about Paramar V, I mentioned the Loyalist Iron Warrior who helped in the defence. This is him, Carvalen. When you use this strong Marine, or tough Marine, durable Marine, he has 4 wounds. I can't think of another Marine character who has 4 wounds. Perturabo. Interestingly, Perturabo was redrawn for the space in a later Horus Heresy book and their Legion specific rules. I think to match the model more. Yeah, so Perturabo's kind of like had double favour there, because for the poor old World Eaters, they haven't had a picture of Angron done once. One of these sort of pencil sketches. The Alpha Legion, which I've been musing on recently. The famous Exodus, the Space Marine Sniper par excellence, and then Alfarius. Well, yes, it's all a bit like Spartacus, isn't it, with Alfarius? You know, if you ask a room of Alpha Legionnaires who's Alfarius, they all stand up and say, "I'm Alfarius." And then the Imperial Fists. And there's Alexis Pollux, the leader of the naval force at the Battle of Foll. The rules for the fan favourite Sigismund, coming into a whopping 230 points. Yeah, if you want to kill something in close combat, Sigismund is your man. And then Rogel Dawn himself. And then finally we have the Alpha Legion. Sorry, not Alpha Legion, Raven Guard. Always their Legionnaires look quite spooky with their black eyes. Yeah, it's somewhat alien looking. And there's rules for Corvus Corax. Quite high points Primarch at 450. Quite pretty formidable. And there we go. Just finish off with a random picture of an Iron Warrior's Castellax. And the usual afterword from the Forge World team. So there you have it. Book 3 of the Horus Heresy. Extermination. So, do you want to get Extermination? Well, I think the same rule holds true from my point of view with this as for the previous reviews I've done. All the army rules in this are pretty outdated now, particularly the tag matter list, which is not fairly points balanced. So if you want to buy, so don't buy this for the army lists because they're out of date and they've been superseded. However, by all means get it for the history, which is very rich and well written and interesting, and also the Legion backgrounds as well, which, you know, I'd almost buy this just to get the bit about the Alpha Legion because it's so fascinating and interesting. So yes, well, there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that review. It's quite long, there's a lot to cover with this one. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section. But apart from that, thank you very much for listening. I will speak to you next time, and goodbye.